Hi, how are you?
Let's start with yesterday's talks in Brussels. It seems that it ended without success. So, did you expect such an outcome?
I did not expect any full success, but I certainly expected some effort to get back on what the essential elements of the dialogue are. And I think in that sense it was an important meeting. Both sides came to the meeting. So we'll have to see. Right now, though, it's clear it has not solved all the problems that remain in the dialogue.
EU and US diplomats also say that it is important to get back on track, to bring them back to the table, both officials from Serbia and Kosovo. But is it now time for a new dialogue format, given that this one is not producing many results? So what should the process look like?
Well, you know, I'm not going to second guess the process that the European Union has put together. I think it's gotten a lot of senior attention in the European Union. It was, I think, important to see actually the President of France participating, the Chancellor of Germany. So I think the Europeans have kind of set an important level of effort. So the real question is the substance of the dialogue. Can we get to a situation where Serbs in Kosovo feel comfortable with their surroundings and have some kind of association of Serb municipalities? And secondly, can Pristina achieve what they want, which is a clearer path to more internationalization? So, you know, these are complex issues, difficult problems. Certainly burdened by a legacy, but also I hope there'll be some inspiration for the future in this. So it's too early to claim somehow failure in this. Let's see how it goes from here.
But how close are we to that point you mentioned?
Well, I'll know it when we're there, and so it's very hard to measure how close you are when you're not there. What I do know is this dialogue process has been interrupted by a very, very difficult situation, and in fact something that was quite harmful to the overall process, and that is the events that took place in Banska.
US called on Serbia to participate in the investigation of Banska case you mentioned, but are parallel investigations in Serbia and Kosovo without cooperation good path, good direction for clearing what happened in Banska?
Well, I think the issue is to focus on what exactly happened, who was responsible, why they did this, and ultimately to create a circumstance where this cannot happen again. So I think that involves a lot of different structures. We're talking about what KFOR, that is the NATO contingent in Kosovo, can do to do its part. What other aspects needs to be addressed. It's not been easy, but I think it's a process that needs to be thorough, needs to be clear to people, and ultimately needs to be effective in making sure this never happens again.
And how to achieve that cooperation, given that both sides have completely opposite interpretation of the event?
That's obviously the problem, and that's why you need mediation for achieving this. Clearly, there are investigations going on. The Serbian side has said they will do a thorough investigation. The Kosovo side is doing the same. I think the U.S. is looking very closely at it, and all for the purpose of making sure there's accountability, but also that we don't have this again. So it's a major factor. But in the end, what we need is a dialogue process aimed at a political solution. So we can never lose sight of the dialogue, and in that sense, I'm pleased that Mr. Lajcik persevered, got the parties together, got some senior European attention. So I think the best thing we can do is support Mr. Lajcik's process, and try to make sure it's ultimately successful. You know, these things don't happen in the time frame that everyone wants them to happen, and especially when you have, you know, major impediments such as what happened in Banska.
In that process, in Brussels process, Pristina called for sanctions against Serbia. So what would be the consequences if the authorities in Belgrade are found responsible for the armed attack?
Well, again, I don't want to foreclose on the questions. Obviously, there are a lot of investigations, so I can't really get into hypotheticals on that. I do want to stress once again, at the risk of sounding awfully repetitive, that this is a problem that needs a political solution, not a military solution. And there needs to be a respect for each side's opinions and to see whether some of these problems can be addressed through a dialogue process. I don't know of a better way to do this. I don't think you're going to have a situation where one side is able to, you know, simply perform a diktat to the other side. I think there needs to be a process of give and take. And I think that's what Mr. Radoičić is trying to do. And you know, for him to work this hard, you know, he's had many accomplishments in his life, and he's working on a very tough issue, and I think he deserves our support.
Now, Pristina also announced that that they will ask for extradition of those who are responsible for the Banska attack, headed with Milan Radoičić. So, given that Serbia and Kosovo don't have cooperation, they don't have the agreement on extradition, how do you see that process?
Well, I can't really get into, you know, what the Pristina government is asking for or not asking for. What I do know is Mr. Radoičić, through his attorney, took some responsibility for what happened. So I'd like to see what is going to be the process going forward with Mr. Radoičić. I understand he's in Serbia, has been told not to leave, and he's been told really to expect a criminal process ahead. So let's see how that plays out. So I'd rather not get into those kinds of questions except to say there needs to be a full accounting of what happened.
How do you see those political messages regarding the Banska case from Belgrade, given that Mr. Vučić told that the attackers are not terrorists for him, and the interpretation of the event?
You know, the issue of who's a terrorist and who's something else is an age-old question. And this is not the first time this has come up. You know, we often talk about these unique situations in Serbia and Kosovo. Well, there's nothing unique about these kinds of situations. So we need, you know, we've seen these kinds of problems before. And again, the way forward, and everyone needs to understand this and understand this much better, is the need for both sides to get on the table what it is they want from this process and make what they want palatable to the other side. And this involves give and take. No one can come away from this dialogue process and say, I want everything, and I force the other side to agree to everything. I think also people need to reflect on the fact that Kosovo and Serbia, they're going to be around for a long time. And what we really need more generally in the region is a capacity for countries in the region to work better together, and in that context to be better candidates for the EU process. And I think we've seen from the EU a desire to do more, to step up its own processes. I think with respect to Serbia, it's important to be in line in this growth process that Madam van der Leyen has talked about in recent weeks. I think a lot of the solution to these things lies in an EU that is considering how better to and how more quickly to bring these countries, such as Serbia, into EU structures. So that's something that's going on, and I'm sure Serbian people are going to pay very closely to that, and I'm sure the Serbian authorities are doing just that.
And when you mentioned EU integrations, there is an open issue regarding sanctions against Russia. Serbia is not imposing the sanctions, and the officials want to emphasize very often that Serbia has been persevering for 20 months not introducing sanctions.
Yeah, Serbia has persevered in not introducing sanctions longer than the Russian army persevered in some parts of Ukraine. Look, this is a clear case of aggression, terrible aggression, aggression that has not only, Russia's not only threatened its neighbors, but has threatened world food supplies, world energy supplies. This is really outrageous behavior by the Russians. I think Serbia has spoken very clearly about this. I think we've seen a kind of emerging relationship. It's not a new relationship, but a strengthening relationship that Serbia has had with Ukraine. We've seen bilateral meetings between the two presidents of the two countries. So I think Serbia is doing some things. You know, with respect to sanctions, I know that's a very sensitive subject in Serbia. My own view, my country's view, is that everyone should join sanctions against Russia. I think it's best for Serbia to understand something like that and to take action based on its understanding. So I'm not here to tell Serbia what to do on this, but I would urge everybody to look at the objective circumstances of one country attacking its neighbor for the purpose of stealing its neighbor's territory. And that is a big problem, and I hope everyone sees it in those terms.
You said once that Serbia is paying a high price for not introducing sanctions. So what was Serbia deprived of?
You know, I think in the sense that, you know, the European Union expects some alignment of foreign policy issues. They expect alignment. And certainly if Serbia were to move on the sanctions issue with Russia, I think there would be an appreciation for the fact that Serbia would bring itself into greater alignment with the European Union on this. I want to emphasize, we believe that Russia needs to be sanctioned for frankly, the crimes it's committed against its neighbor. But I'm not sure it's helpful for me to sit here and tell Serbia what they need to do. Serbia needs to think these issues through themselves, to understand their aspirations for the European Union, to understand that that is the future of Serbia. There's no other place for Serbia to go. And so I hope they will make up their own mind in this regard.
Ties with China are also deepened. During the last visit in Beijing, a free trade agreement was signed. And how will this affect bilateral relations between Belgrade and Washington?
You know, Serbia has a right to carry on its relations with other countries. The U.S. has a relationship with China. Frankly, we have a lot more trade with China than Serbia has with China. So again, I'm not here to deliver lectures on what Serbia needs to do about China. I think we see in the newspapers in Serbia, we see in the press an effort to acquaint readers and the public with the fact that there are good sides and there are bad sides. China's relationships with some smaller countries, whether it's in Africa or in Southeast Asia, sometimes there's been a lot of concern about some of these economic ties. So I think Serbia has the maturity and the understanding to deal with these kinds of things carefully and in the interests of Serbia. Obviously, our interests get touched occasionally by these issues, and we're certainly in touch with the Serbian government. But again, I think the best foreign policy is when you have good consultations, when you don't surprise each other, when you have a free exchange of views, and when you don't think that you could just tell the other side what to do. And so that's the kind of relationship we want to have with Serbia, and I think we're working on that.
And when it comes to that cooperation and relationship, are the close ties between Serbian officials and U.S. blacklisted people from Serbia and Bosnian entity Republika Srpska open issue between Belgrade and Washington?
Well,
how do you look
I
to
think
that?
we have had some real problems with the Serbian leadership in Bosnia. There's no question. This is a big problem for us. And when we look at some of these officials, whether they're these individuals, what they've done, what their views are, we have a right to make decisions that are based on our needs and on our security. And some of these people, we don't want to give them visas. We don't want them to be having their bank accounts in the United States. We frankly don't want anything to do with them, and we certainly have a right to declare those people, in that sense, persona non grata. We've certainly done that with Mr. Dodik. We've done that more recently with his adult children, by the way. We call them children, but they're actually adults. And we've made it very clear. We're not going to deal with people who abuse other people's money and who otherwise behave in ways that we don't feel are up to any kind of standards. And we're going to take action to protect ourselves against such people.
And do you see that Belgrade is investigating very serious allegations in those explanations of sanctions of the U.S. Treasury Department?
Well, I know that Belgrade certainly has its opinions about these issues. I'm speaking really to the Republika Srpska sanctions, which have been, I think, appropriately designed to go after people who have, in many different ways, caused enormous problems, starting with the fact that they do not support the Dayton Peace Accords. I would emphasize, I think the Dayton Peace Accords were a very good thing for the Serbian, ethnic Serbian people in Bosnia. I think the Dayton Peace Accords are quite appropriate and really a good approach. And the Belgrade authorities have said that on many occasions, and that they support that and support the territorial integrity of Bosnia. So when we see people in Bosnia, and whoever they are, we feel, as we do in any country, the right to take action against such people and keep such people off of our territory and make sure that they are not doing business with us. So that's kind of the basis of these sanctions.
You're present here in this region for a very long time, and many of political figures and political parties were active in the 90s and now in the region, in Serbia also. And was it easier for you to speak with them then or now?
I represent U.S. interests, and I believe that U.S. interests are best served by well-informed diplomats. So I speak to just about everybody I can, because in the plurality of opinions, you'll learn things. I don't try to restrict myself into terms of, I'll only speak to certain people because certain other people don't want me to speak to certain people. I'll make my own choices as to who I speak to.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you.